And they took him out of the incubator. This is garbage. There were no babies being tossed out of incubators. Assad was not gassing his own people. This concept of the ruthless, genocidal madman who has zero positive aspects to his own people, but yet somehow manages to stay in power. It's just a boogeyman. It's constantly being made up, and those of us that have a brain owe it to ourselves to think critically. The whole weapons of mass destruction gig, it's up. Nobody believes it. You've gone to the bank too many times. The well is dry. The well is dry. It's totally insane. I mean, to be a white man in America is to know that demographic replacement and the problems facing your own people are the biggest threat to your own national security. What's going on in Venezuela doesn't affect American national security. In a sense, I could almost say that I wish it did. I wish that we had our problems so figured out at home that we could be concerned with, like, reenacting some type of, the Monroe Doctrine 2.0 or something like that. But the fact of the matter is, when your country's borders are wide open, when you're fighting wars for Israel left and right, when the majority of your country is suffering from an opioid epidemic, they're not even at replacement birth rates, when religion is dying out in your society, Venezuela is not even in the top 5, probably not even the top 10 of national security interest. And we got to think critically about this, my friends. No question. He said that those who engage in anti-Semitism must be punished, whether it is here at the UN or by political leaders, editors, policy pundits, or college professors. It does not matter. That's right. If you are in a college class and you express criticism of the nation of Israel, your professor must punish you, because no thought must go unpunished. Are you guys waking up to the fact that free speech is not real yet? That the dominant power holds the power over what is allowed to be spoken about. They control the Overton window in your nations, and in this case, because we live in a global society, the world. A UN ambassador, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, is basically saying that criticism of his ethnic group should be banned, punished by people who can come to your house with machine guns and arrest you for daring to say, well, you know what? I don't know if I agree with everything they do. It's illegal now. You're not allowed to do it, people. We're not going to live in the boomer universe where everything is great. There's free, cheap love, and you fall ass first into money. That's not our world. Our world will be a world of struggle and survival and establishing or reestablishing who we are. We see that changes are coming. We're living through the fourth turning, so to speak. And in a sense, we have a front row seat to the most interesting time in history. Ben Stiller came to Washington, D.C. Wednesday and testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on the humanitarian crisis in Syria, sharing intimate details about the families he met while imploring the U.S. to continue their assistance. That's right. Now, of course, what Mr. Stiller is conveniently leaving out is how the United States, in conjunction with Israel, have funded the moderate rebels in Syria. The group that has done its absolute best, a group that you might have heard of, they're called ISIS. They've done their absolute best to destabilize Syria, to murder innocent men, women, and children, to push out moderate Muslims, to murder Christians, all at the behest of Israeli interests. I had a story, I made a video, it's a short form video, back when I was still doing short form videos instead of just a live format. I think it was the Jerusalem Post. It was either the Jerusalem Post or Haaretz that posted this. They admitted that the Israeli government was funding ISIS. And not only were they funding ISIS, they were treating ISIS fighters at hospitals in the Golan Heights. So these guys would get wounded while fighting the Assad regime or the Iranians or the Russians or whatever, flee into Israel, be treated at Israeli hospitals in the Golan Heights, and then go right back into Syria to destabilize the Assad regime and kill more innocent people. And yet Ben Stiller is going to come to you or to me, and he's going to say, hey, guess what, Jefferson Lee? Guess what, Lee Army? Guess what, American public as a whole? We have to take in these poor Syrian refugees because their countries are being destroyed. But of course, he cleverly omits who is funding them, and he cleverly omits just who exactly is behind all of this nonsense. So this guy goes in front of Congress and he literally has to tell us, we got to take in more people. He's visited Germany. He thinks the Germans should take in more refugees. The Germans. Because Europe hasn't been destroyed enough, because America hasn't been destroyed enough. That's right, we got to take in more third worlders. You bomb a country, you destroy a country, you send in troops, you irradiate their people with depleted uranium rounds, and then somehow the people who you're telling your citizens are the enemy, yet you also criticize your citizens for not wanting to bring in refugees from the country you just bombed. And you bring in the refugees, and then they blow shit up in your country, and then you wonder what the hell happened. Your nation has been co-opted by another power that doesn't like you, doesn't care about you, in fact hates your guts. They are using you to destroy their enemies, and then as part of a double-barbed, multi-pronged attack, as part of a pincer movement, they will bomb their enemies and then destroy you because you're also their enemy, even though you're dumb enough to work for them, by bringing the people you just bombed into your own nation. Exactly what is happening, and that is what Ben Stiller is going in front of Congress and advocating for.
The term refugee has unfortunately become politicized, despite the fact that refugees are real people with real stories, like for millions of people around the world. They don't want to be dependent on aid. We therefore need to provide the host countries with long-term structural support. We need to help them ensure that their health services, education systems, and livelihood opportunities are available to refugees.
This is a problem. We live in a society that it kind of inherently loves revolution because we think of the term revolution tied to American Revolution as this great founding story. But the reality is many revolutions turn societies upside down in the worst way possible. Liberalism and the ideas that the American founding fathers based their society upon in many respects have set us up for this failure. Now, there are many people that would point out, I think correctly, that the Founding Fathers didn't really believe liberalism. I think I would agree, but it doesn't matter what they believed or didn't believe. The fact of the matter is, what is on paper doesn't protect us from what has been happening. It doesn't. It doesn't do it. Liberalism is running itself out to its logical conclusion, and it is screwing over anyone who dared to believe in it. This is late-stage liberalism, my friends, and it's not going to be pretty. We're part of this world. We live in this world. We can't help what happened before us. All we can do is react to it and put forward ideas that are going to maybe change things in the future. But the fact of the matter is, Ilhan Omar is in Congress because says they weren't specific enough when founding the nation. I totally agree. Round of applause for Patty Pat. I totally agree. Look, who is a nation for? What do these people believe in? These are things that must be hashed out going forward. And it's not just, do you believe in the Constitution? A society must have a shared religion or people will come into conflict. And that is why we are worse off demographically and spiritually and socially than a huge amount of Europe who has a greater connection to their land, has a greater connection to their culture and their history than we do. And that's a fact. And that's why Ilhan Omar is in Congress, guys. You can't deny the fact that the sacral is important to our societies. I touched on this past Sunday. When a society's religion fails, when it's calling to something greater than oneself fails, your society is in a lot of trouble. There are so many whites out there that will say things like, how are we falling victim to these Muslims or something to that effect? And again, I don't believe that Muslims are even the problem, but just bear with me for a second. How can white societies fall victim to Islam when people coming from these societies are, I hate using this, but we'll say it anyway, are lower IQ, or they've never created anything, or so on and so forth. Why are they so strong? Why do they come into white countries and have a stronger will, perhaps, than whites? Well, part of the reason is that they believe that they are fighting for something greater than themselves. And this removal of a national identity from a religious identity has been problematic for the Western man. Your IQ, at the end of the day, doesn't matter when defending yourself from your enemy if you're not willing to die, if you're not willing to devote your life to your civilization and to a cause greater than yourself. If you're not willing to do that, you're going to lose to people who are, even if they're not as smart as you. And that's what we're seeing here. If your religious roots fade and you are drawn towards hedonism, a destruction of family values, individualism taken to a grotesque scale like we see in the West, ultimately you're going to be atomized and you're going to be defeated by an enemy that otherwise would be unable to do so. And I have a hard time viewing this in a different light, about how Christianity, inspired us to push the Muslims out of Spain, kept Vienna safe twice from foreign invasion. There was a time where Christianity, and perhaps even more specifically Catholicism, was strong enough in the European mind to make a difference, to inspire us to be greater than what we are. It's become weakened by liberalism, by individualism, and this is a huge issue. And this is something that needs to be addressed. Ilhan Omar would have never been a representative in any type of European society and again, I'm critical of the Catholic Church in many respects, but when the Catholic Church had hegemonical control of Europe, it would not have happened, period. Period.